What's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern. Today, Renata Glasc has finally been revealed in her entirety. I am super excited to talk about her today, and I am not usually one to buy into the hype on new champions. I feel like people tend to get very overwhelmed with the newness that is presented and sort of tend to overlook the downsides to certain things that are introduced on champion kits. In Renata's case, though, I am very hesitant to say that the hype is justified. I think this champion has so much going on with her kit that is going to make her phenomenally strong, especially in some places that I feel like people aren't going to look. So let's go ahead and take a look at her ability rundown, starting of course with her passive, Leverage, which I think is phenomenally good, by the way. Now, Leverage causes her basic attacks to deal bonus damage and mark her enemies. Damage from Renata's allies consume the mark to deal additional damage. Now, there doesn't appear to be a cooldown, at least from this description. This is every time Renata attacks, she does bonus damage and marks you, and then the ally can get bonus damage. This means that Renata at level 1 can walk at you and auto attack you, and her AD carry can walk at you and auto attack you, and they're going to out DPS you every single time because Renata can keep applying this mark and her ally can keep detonating that mark, and you just do so much damage and so much targeted free damage that your opponent has no possible way of out DPSing you at that point. This also means that Renata has some synergies with items like Ardent Sensor, which not only lets her attack faster, but makes her AD carry attack faster so they can apply the mark better. Like, this is really, really powerful, you guys, and I feel like this is going to get overlooked with all of the other things that are going on from Renata's kit, but make no mistake, this is a phenomenally strong ability and already a great start for our newest support champion. Renata's Q's Handshake, which is a hilariously named ability, and this sends out a missile that roots the first enemy it hits, and she can reactivate it to throw the enemy in a direction to damage enemies hit with the thrown unit and stun them if the thrown unit was a champion. Now, this is already really strong because of the fact that it's CC with its own follow-up crowd control. Like, even as you're seeing in this diagram right here, right, the root only lasts for like a half second, but then there's another half second throw on top of that. You're then able to wombo that with the other crowd control in Renata's kit. I think that's really good. It means that Renata, who lands the Q in the first place, is able to then choose which CC direction she wants, unlike Thresh or Talia, who kind of have to pick in advance what direction they want to throw you in. Renata can root you and then has a moment to kind of think to herself, okay, which direction do I actually want you to go in? Is this better for me? Is this worse for me? Do I want to throw you away? Do I want to pull you closer? Like, a lot of potential ways for this ability to be used, not even counting the ability for her to throw you into somebody and then stun that person as well, doubling up on the crowd control even further. The thing that I think will make this ability slightly weaker is the fact that the travel time is fairly long, and the projectile, there's a decent wind-up on this ability, and this ability is body blocked by minions, so it's a little bit easier for people to get out of the way, but I think still a very good ability, and definitely strong when comboed with Renata's other crowd control. But before we get to that, we have to talk about Renata's W, and this is what everyone is going to be talking about, you guys. This is called Bailout. So she gives an allied champion, including herself, a ramping attack speed and a movement speed towards nearby enemies. If you get a takedown on an enemy champion, the buff duration resets, and if the ally would die while this ability is active, their health is set back to full, and they burn to death over the next 3 seconds, but they can stop the burn by getting a champion takedown before they die. Now, this already is drawing a lot of comparisons to things like Zillion Ultimate. It's drawing comparisons to things like Shan Revive. There are a lot of potential ways in which this ability could be phenomenally strong by just saying, hey, you can't kill my ally. This close scenario where you're going to dive and you know you're going to die, but you're going to get the kill on my friend first. No, you're not, because I'm going to W them. They're not going to die. They're going to actually go back to full health, and then they're going to kill you, and then they get to stay at full health and keep my buff because the duration refreshed the second we got a takedown. Like, that's crazy strong. There's a lot of ways that this ability can be used and abused. To be fair to this ability, you do burn to death over 3 seconds, and that's automatic. It doesn't matter how much health you have. It's not like Scion passive where the more health he's got, the longer he can stay in the zombie state. It is 3 seconds permanently. It also doesn't say anything about you going back to full health upon cleansing the burn, right? You just cleanse the burn. So if you barely get a takedown right before you burn to death, you're only going to have a couple hundred health left anyways, and you're just going to die to ambient damage in the rest of the team fight, right? The other thing that's going to keep this ability from being too crazy is the fact that it has a ramping attack speed buff, which means that if you're not using this ability early in a team fight, that steroid isn't going to have time to build up and actually get use out of it. You may just be saving this ability for a potential revive when you could have used it on your Jinx or your Kog'Maw and given them just a ton of attack speed to just win the team fight outright with, right? And this ability is going to have like a 30-second cooldown on it or something. There's no way this ability could be a multiple times in a team fight ability. Like, there just is not a chance of that, guys. So in that regard, it's going to feel very much like an ultimate level cooldown. Like, it feels kind of like Batiste E, if you're familiar with Overwatch, where he has the immortality field, which is like in some cases stronger than his ultimate ability. Like, this is how Bailout feels to me. I do think there are a lot of things that sort of balance this out, but in like a best case scenario, this is like a Kshan revive, except your ally never died and respawns in the spot in which they were killed, as opposed to going back to base, which is like really strong. And especially given that this can be targeted. You can pick an ally and say, you're going to get the bonus. Very, very powerful ability, definitely going to be iconic, and definitely going to be the most frustrating thing about Renata going forwards. Coming down from that quite a bit, though, we have Renata's E, which is Loyalty Program. She sends out the rockets that shield allies and damage and slow enemies they pass through. This also applies in an area of effect around Renata and in an explosion at the end of the ability's range. Now, if the ability is as short-ranged as it is in this clip here, I think it's going to be totally fine. Renata will have to expose herself to a lot of harm in order to step up and actually use this ability. There are going to be a lot of situations where she's firing at an ally and therefore getting no bonuses out of the damage component of this ability, or shooting it at an enemy and getting very little value out of the shield component of this ability. There are going to be very few circumstances in which I feel like she's going to get both use cases, but in a similar fashion to Senna's Piercing Darkness and how that sort of works with Senna if she has a composition that wants to run at you, because then she can heal the people in front of her and also damage people behind, through the target. I think that's going to end up being a very powerful ability, but I think that's only really a realistic use case for Renata if this ability's range is longer than depicted right now. If it's this short range, I think it's going to be fine. I think it's a very useful ability. The slow then lets you combo into something like Handshake, which then lets you combo into something like Ultimate. There are potential combos here, but I don't think this is the most interesting or exciting ability on Renata's kit by a landslide. Moving on to Renata's R, Hostile Takeover. She sends out a cloud that causes enemies to berserk, giving them bonus attack speed, making them attack basically just the nearest unit, prioritizing their allies, then neutral monsters, then Renata's allies, then Renata herself. This doesn't do any damage, and there's a pretty decent delay on this, and it's not that far ranged. That said, I do think that this ability has the potential to be very strong as a follow-up initiation. If you have something like a Malphite or an Ornn or a Shen starting a fight for your team and CCing multiple members, then you have the opportunity to follow up with Hostile Takeover, because the delay on it isn't going to be that big of a deal if you have that first CC in order to help set you up, and then the enemy team is basically stunned for what's looked like 2 seconds here, which is pretty phenomenal given that this is a pure crowd control ability. I feel like 2-second stun is pretty beefy. It makes sense because it does no damage, but it also means that it's really, really strong. This also gives Renata some sort of fun utility when dealing with enemy AD stacking teams or attack speed stacking teams, because you can say, hey, all of you punch each other with all that AD and attack speed you built, and here's some more attack speed for fun. Like, that's going to be really, really funny versus mages, where you can make them attack each other and no one dies, right? It's a wet noodle fight. But I still think a very powerful ability, especially, again, if you're able to Loyalty Program and then pull somebody back or throw them into an ally to stun them, and then follow that up with Hostile Takeover. If you're able to Animation Cancel, then that makes this even more reliable. Actually, on second viewing, the range on this is pretty decent, which means that you can use this even as your jungler shows up. If you're like under tower or something, you step forward a little bit, you fire this as your jungler lands their CC, you end up hitting the berserk, which then, because it's a taunt, you can have your ally run back towards you because the enemy's taunted, and they'll run after the ally, and just a lot of fun things you can do with this. Definitely another very strong ability. I think it's going to draw less attention than Bailout, but it definitely feels like Renata has 2 ultimates on her kit, which is phenomenal overall. And just this much utility, I really feel like, is going to make Renata just a phenomenally strong champion. I think, unless her numbers are bad, there is no way she doesn't get played professionally. I really just think that there is no chance, given the amount of utility she has and the amount of things that she can do and how powerful some of her abilities can be in coordinated environments. I think that there's absolutely no chance that Renata doesn't get played professionally. Again, assuming her numbers are okay. There are a couple other things that I had questions about that maybe we'll see if they work the way I think they do, and if they don't, then she might end up being weaker or stronger. For example, if the ramping attack speed ramps infinitely while the buff lasts, so if you get the first kill, you get more attack speed, like on a Jinx, that could be really, really scary, but maybe it doesn't work like that. Maybe there is a cap, right? So like, some things might influence that opinion, but I really do feel like Renata is going to see professional play because of how powerful her kit has the potential to be. In terms of Renata's thematics, honestly, I like Renata's story for some of its aspects. I think it does a good job of showing how altruism can be taken in sort of a negative approach, and sort of setting up Renata to use altruism as a tool rather than as its sort of intended to be, and also as a way of sort of showing how you can have a character with potentially good intentions end up using them for what essentially amounts to evil, right? But on the other hand, Renata's bio sets her out to be this, enormously impactful character who basically controls Zaun and has her claws in Piltover and can, at a moment's notice, take over the entirety of the Twin City. But we've never heard about her before at all until this moment, right? It kind of feels like the writer for this character basically said, oh, my OC, and she's really important and impactful and exciting, and here's the backstory I've written for her, as opposed to a character that feels naturally integrated with everything else we know about League of Legends. Maybe I'm a little salty because she's not Karina Varaza, and I tried to call Riot's shot and ended up being wrong. So maybe that's it, but I do feel like Riot pushed her story a little too far. I would have liked it if she was just now starting to get into Piltover as opposed to already being sort of the de facto head of everything, And I feel like, again, there was a missed opportunity in not making Renata Caitlyn C. Like, I really feel like that would have been a thing that Riot could have done, and I think it would have really elevated this character. But alas, it's sort of where we're at. I do really like her visual design. TV Skyans touched on this a little bit, but I think she has an absolutely gorgeous visual design. I think a lot of what's going on for Renata is really great. I do think it's weird that she's referred to as Renata Glasc, like always first name, last name, and not just Renata. We'll see if that ends up being the case when she actually hits the client. But if she is Renata Glasc always, that's going to be a little bit weird to me. But either way, I think a really interesting addition to the game. I think going to be very powerful for sure. I don't think she's going to be playable in a solo lane, guys. I know there are those of you who are already thinking, oh, mid lane Renata or whatever, but she doesn't have the wave clear, and she can't really use her passive that well if she's in a solo lane. I really don't feel like this character is going to be very good in a solo lane at all. A lot of her tools sort of work better for like a traditional AD carry bot lane setup with her as the support. But I still think she's going to be a very interesting champion to play. But you'll have to let me know what you're thinking of her down in the comments section below. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.